If they're good about it, the bank goes in and winterizes these homes and tries to kind of protect what is actually their asset. But you can see a little bit of the vandalism and stuff that's going on out here. And actually, some of the suburban areas are much less well equipped to deal with these issues than actually the cities are. Here's a place next door. They were constructing it. They just stopped. Right? They just stopped, and they didn't even board it up. And you know, I've worked a lot in deindustrialized towns, actually in Illinois, because I taught in Western Illinois for 10 years and spent all this time in places like Quad Cities and Peoria during the farm implement crash of the early 80s. But when a place isn't even boarded up, that's a real cry for help, right? The city is not even able to board it up. And it's a hazard, right? It's a hazard to kids, it's a hazard to people to go into half-constructed homes. But this is a different picture of foreclosure than our common mindset, right? This isn't actually supposed to happen in these locations. So, do I have any solutions or anything? Well, I've been saying this for 5 years, and I actually am always surprised by everything in this project, but foreclosure is the root of the problem. If you would have told me 5 years ago that we just let middle-class homeowners go belly up and just shrug our shoulders and think, what can we do now? I would have been appalled. And remember, of course, we have promoted home ownership for 50, 60, 70 years, right? People didn't just wake up with the idea out of the blue. Well, one of the things that's come to light in recent weeks is the fraudulent foreclosure filings are apparently just the way lenders and servicers do business. And so what we have found, 23 states have foreclosure through the courts, judicial foreclosure. Illinois is one of them. And somebody in the servicer, you may pay your loan, but you're not paying it to the person that owns your mortgage. You're paying it to a company which is paid to take your payments and then distribute them to the securities holders, right? They employed what we now call robo-signers. They have to testify who owns your property. You can't legally foreclose on somebody if you don't own that piece of property. But we cannot often figure out who owns a piece of property because those mortgages have been securitized 3 or 4 times, been divided into different pieces and stuff like that. As bizarre as it sounds, in many cases, we can't actually trace the title. And you know that you have to have clear title to your property, otherwise, you know, you can't sell it, right? There's something called title insurance where you buy a house and they insure that this has clear title. Right now, the title insurance industry is saying, we're not insuring this stuff anymore. But what they were doing is they'd have somebody in a room signing 15,000 documents, I don't know, in a week, saying, I testify that I have personal knowledge of who owns this property and how much they owe. This is the other thing, because when people get behind, they add a huge amount of penalties and things onto people's mortgages that they could never get out from under, and they testified by signing this that they have personal knowledge, but they didn't. And then days later, they took the documents and had them notarized. Okay? Have you ever had a document in a notary public? What has to happen? You sign it when the notary public witnesses your signature and puts hers or her stamp on it. This wasn't happening at all. GMAC, which used to be part of General Motors, which is now owned by the Treasury Department because we bailed them out, $17 billion worth, right? Admitted, oh, well, we were doing this fraudulently. We're going to stop foreclosure right now till we sort all this out. So right now, all the big lenders have said, well, we're stopping foreclosures in the judicial foreclosure states because, oh, guess what? We've been committing fraud. Right? Now, what happens in the non-judicial foreclosure states, we don't know yet, like Minnesota. The Minnesota Attorney General says, you should freeze foreclosures in our state too because you're probably also committing fraud in Minnesota. So if you think like a geographer, you have a very uneven landscape of this stuff right now, right? So, and there was a bill that an Alabama congressman got into another bill that said you can, if a state allows electronic notary publics, every other state's got to accept this. This just shows you how far ahead of the game these servicers and lenders are. They already had this passed through the Congress and the Senate, but I do understand that President Obama actually has decided to pocket veto this thing. Because what that would have meant is if one state says, you don't have to witness anything, it's legal in our state, then all other states would have had to actually accept that. But people are being foreclosed on loans that they never got. And if you buy a foreclosed house under these conditions, your title is clouded. If it was illegally foreclosed upon in the first place, then who owns this house, right? This is, you know, the stuff of science fiction, if you ask me. But it's real. And it's costing, you know, it's going to take years to sort this out. The mortgage industry is still fighting to avoid regulation. Still fighting. We need anti-predatory lending legislation at the federal level. And we all know about a federal bailout of the financial sector, which is somewhere over $1 trillion plus. And if you want to read a good book about this, The Big Short is an excellent book about how this stuff is securitized and stuff like that. The short term. Well, we ought to have a foreclosure moratorium for owner-occupied homes. Remember I said you have to distinguish between investor-occupied and owner-occupied and maybe have different rules. And I had this on here even before the robo-signing issue came up. Because the only way to stop the fall in housing prices is to stop foreclosures. And then when we evict people, the property's being emptied and destroyed, etc., like that, right? So we should have a foreclosure moratorium, and I know that many attorney generals are calling for this because of the actual fraud. So if you want to do something to deal with this issue, contact your attorney general's office or your legislatures. Loan renegotiations. You know, there's 25% of homeowners are underwater right now, at least. They owe more on their house than the house is worth. And more people fall into that situation every day as house prices continue to drop. You know, this whole thing about renegotiating interest rates or giving you a 40-year loan or whatever, it's not working. You need to reduce principals. This is a very hot button topic because it's like, who is going to pay for this? And one reason they won't do this that I found out is that the servicers, the people that you pay your bills to, there's 3 major servicers in this country and they own the majority of